managing a diverse workforce in the 21st century. So workplace diversity refers to the variety of differences between people in an organization. Diversity encompasses race, gender, ethnic group, age, personality, cognitive style, tenure, organizational function, education, background, and more. So you see it's a plethora of things that relate to diversity in the workforce. I think we used to just think that was race, but we see it's a whole lot more than race nowadays, right? Especially as the generations are changing. And we're going to talk a little bit about generations in just a bit. So I wanted to put the cool, I'm older, so I used to watch Batman. So if you guys ever remember Batman, remember when there was a continuing episode? It would be like, last time, Bat fans, or something like that. I wasn't cool enough to be able to put that. But remember the last time we talked about leadership styles? Leadership styles, there are several leadership styles. All of them work in different capacities. You have to be able to be situational as a leader when you're managing a staff. So every one of those styles has a time and a place where it will apply. So the first one, coercive, demands immediate compliance. You would think that would never be a leadership style, but in time of crisis, that's the perfect time. We don't have a whole lot of time to put our heads together and say, hey, well, how do we want to do this? In a time of crisis, we need to be able to have a plan ready, and everybody needs to be able to execute it. So sometimes that actually works, the coercive style. But you see the overall impact is usually negative. All right, next is pace setting. Initiative, drive to achieve. Now it says the impact is mostly negative also, and why is that? Because sometimes the leader is way out front and everybody else is lagging behind, and they haven't kind of got on the same page of how they're going to do things. All right? Authoritative, mobilization towards a vision. Impact is strongly positive. I think I told you this story. One of the first things that I had to do was present to the staff at West High as a new AP, and I did some research on mission, vision, and core values. And I always say, I'm a former math teacher, so I go from left to right. The mission was supposedly the car. The vision was the destination. And the core value was the fuel you're putting into the car to get you to that destination. So you see, in authoritative, you have to mobilize everybody towards the vision. That's where we want to go. So we're trying to move ourselves in that direction. Affiliative, create harmony, people come first. Maybe we can call that the kumbaya leadership style. Huh? All hold hands and we walk into the water together. Democratic, collaboration, we build buy-in. You see positive, 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 and then the last one is coaching, developing people for the future. And that's something that we really need to start thinking about, because as we do one of the exercises, we will find that we have a lot of baby boomers that are probably within 5 to 10 years of walking out the door to retirement. So are we building our bench? Are we getting everybody ready to succeed us, especially when we see talent? So that last part right there talks about the best leadership style is a combination of the following styles used in a situational manner: authoritative, affiliative, democratic, and coaching. You got to be able to kind of put those all together in a recipe and try to use them together. Questions or comments on this? Kind of a little bit of a review. All right. We're going to move into, I'm going to get inside you guys' brains a little bit. Emotional intelligence. Anybody ever heard of emotional intelligence? I am sure we probably have done some performance management with some employees. I'm not just looking right over at you, Darren, because we've done this a lot, done some performance management with employees where we're working on usually how to get along with others. All right? So emotional intelligence, what is EQ? EQ is your ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, your behavior, in yourself and your relationship with others. Our first reaction to an event is usually going to be an emotional one. And consider the 5 core feelings: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and shame. And I consider this, when it says your relationship with others, I consider that going back to preschool and elementary school, being able to play well in the sandbox together, being able to share toys, right? And sometimes people at a younger age can't do that, and they grow into adults, and they can't do that either. It might be a decision that we made. We all had consensus. We left the room, and then there was a concrete conversation. I learned that from Miss Wren when I worked for her. You guys know what a concrete conversation is? That's when we have a staff meeting, but then we have a staff meeting after the staff meeting out in the parking lot. And we talk about what we didn't like in the staff meeting. rather than be courageous and maybe bring it up in the staff meeting so we can have some good discourse. All right? So we have to learn to play well in the sandbox and be able to disagree without being disagreeable. One of my colleagues, I really learned a lot from him. He says he learned a lot from me. It's Eric Hofer Holderman. I don't know if you guys know him. He's a principal at Mayberry. And he used to always say, I respectfully disagree with that. And then he'd give you the why. Then I stole that. I just said, I'm going to start using that. Because sometimes we don't agree with people, but usually the unceremoniously cowardly way is like, okay, all right. But then we don't agree. It's best to say, I respectfully disagree, and then start to have some discourse. And then you may meet in the middle, all right? Facts about emotional intelligence. It's the strongest driver of leadership and personal excellence. 90% of high performers have a high EQ. And notice, that doesn't say 90% of high performers have a high IQ, because IQ is kind of set from birth. You can maybe a little bit, get a little smarter, but usually you're just born with the IQ. You're either smart or you're not. But EQ you can develop, right? Remember that. High EQs make more money on average. Now, of course, we know research is, might be some fake news, might be real. $29,000 more per year for people with high EQs. They can play better in the sandbox, all right? Impacts almost everything you do and say every day. Okay, single biggest predictor of performance in the workplace is a flexible skill that can be learned. IQ is fixed. So you can be not extremely smart, but be very adaptable and intuitive and learn from others and work well with others and be respectful to others and maybe jump somebody that has a higher IQ because they're inflexible. They think they're smart, they know it, and they're not willing to listen to anybody else. And then the last part right there accounts for 58% of the successful performance achieved on the job. So almost 60% of the success on the job is from people having the intuitive skill to be able to move and mold and reshape themselves. So the 4 components of EQ, the first part is the self. Most of us, when we've gotten to this point, we're pretty good with self. We know how to monitor self. I always laugh and joke, and I tell the people that I work with, I talk to myself a lot. And I talk to myself a lot because I was an only child until I was 12. And then my parents had a decision to have a little sister come along. It just could have been me the whole time. But I talked to myself because I didn't have brothers and sisters at a young age. Now I talk to myself in my 50s because I tend to have a constant dialogue coaching myself. Come on, Mitchell, you got to get this done. You got this presentation. You got to make sure this gets done. So, it transferred from when I was younger to now, and it's actually a good conversation. Now, sometimes I get on my nerves, but first part is self-awareness on the left-hand side. Emotional awareness, ability to read and understand emotions. Accurate self-assessment. Do I know my strengths and limitations? My wife and daughter will tell you I have no patience, okay? But I have great patience in the workplace. So you see how situationally we can be? I'm a taskmaster with my daughter. But you know what? I'm my mother. I sound like my mother when I'm talking to my daughter. I was never a taskmaster with the people that I supervise in the workplace because I always worried about their feelings a little bit more. So I hate to psychoanalyze myself in front of all you guys, but I think that's what got me to where I am right now, having one of those tough boot camp Army sergeant type mothers, all right? My father was a lot easier on me than my mother, all right? Something about those mothers. Self-confidence, strong, positive sense of self-worth. I think that's important with leaders. We have to be comfortable in our own skin. All right, look over at the self-management part. Do you have self-control? Are you trustworthy? Are you conscientious? Conscientious kind of reminds me of the whole integrity piece. Are you doing what needs to be done no matter who's watching? That's kind of the conscientious ability to manage yourself and your responsibilities. Adaptability. We're going to hear that word a lot. Achievement orientation. Do you have a drive to achieve? Is it internal? All right, and initiative. And you see, I'm a little older. I put that Popeye up there. I am what I am. EQ, the social competence part. Now, this is the part where a lot of our employees struggle. Sometimes we might struggle also, but usually when we get to the management leadership stage, we do a better job of interacting with others. All right? But some of our employees don't do as good of a job. So this is probably where a lot of us and them can improve our skills and do a little bit better job in the workplace. So we see social awareness. Do you have empathy? Empathy is a step higher than sympathy. All right? Are you putting yourself in others' shoes and understanding kind of where they are and what they're doing? Organizational awareness, ability to read the work environment, build decision-making networks, and navigate politics. At the building level, when I was a teacher, I managed my classroom. Pretty much a self-contractor. I was in control. I knew I had to follow district initiatives, but when you're good at that, you can just teach your class. You don't have to worry about it. You become an administrator. Now I got to answer to the principal. I also got to work with the teachers and the parents. So you're not completely in control. I did not realize how political it was until I got downtown, all right? I know the sky is blue, and I'm telling them the sky is blue, and they're saying, no, it's not, it's gray. And you have to go, oh, what? Hold it, it's blue. I'm looking right at it. So then you have to be able to work with somebody that's over your head, that's telling you it's gray, and you have to gently remind them, no, it's actually, let's call it blue-gray. All right? So we kind of have to work in that capacity. That is extremely important to learn how to do because you can't just tell your boss they're wrong, right? Nobody answered, but I think you agree with me, right? Service orientation, ability to recognize and meet customers' needs. If we're always thinking that we have customers to satisfy, I think we'll always be on our game. But when we don't, when we forget that the kids that walk in the door are kind of what helps us make our ends meet and pay our mortgages, then we'll stay focused. But when we lose that focus, then sometimes we get out of whack. Social skills, visionary leadership, influence, developing others, communication, change catalyst, conflict management, building bonds, and teamwork and collaboration. I don't want to go into all of that. That's a lot of information, but they all kind of make sense. But some people don't get components of that. They don't communicate well. They don't handle change well. They're not strategic. They don't build bonds. It's just kind of like my way, and if it's not not my way, I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home. It usually doesn't work well in the workplace. I thought this was a really good model. Icebergs and visual models are really good. Look at what's above the water. Knowledge and skill. A lot of that is the IQ. Some of it might be the experience of things that we've learned, demonstrated, learned abilities. But look what's beneath the water. Iceberg, we remember the Titanic. What's beneath was a lot more than what was above. Social role, self-image, your traits, and your motives. Always more beneath than there is above. All right? So we have to have that delicate balance of having what's beneath, but also showing what's above, the skill and the knowledge that's above. All right? All right, I think I'm putting a lot of you guys to sleep. Now it's time to have a nice activity. All right? So I'm going to get you guys up. But first, let me give you the instructions. This is going to be a group timeline. So we're going to get up, and you can't talk. Can't talk means you can't talk. All right, now, it's nonverbal. So we're going to start a timeline, and we're going to start all the way over there, kind of by where Grace is, and we're going to go all the way around, hopefully this way, and we're going to put ourselves in a timeline chain of the oldest to the youngest, because we're going to start talking about generations. So, everybody up. And if you think you're older than everybody, I'm going to walk over here, because I think I'm as old or older than everybody in here. So you can't talk, but the years starting at, if anybody's born in 50s and 60s, all the way over here to the people that are born in the 70s. We can kind of do a reveal. I'm 64, so am I in the right area? Where should I be? This way? I'm older than you, right? Yes? Yes. She said yes, even though it's probably, I don't know. So let's start. Terry, we'll start with you. Year, just the year.
Year? I was born?
Yes.
How old I am?
Year you were born. Year you were born. It's hard to do it non-verbally, isn't it?
We're all real close here. 58. 59. 59. 64.
Come on over here with me, brother. We're young.
61.
64.
64.
64.
62.
Come on, man. You're old.
I'm already old. They tried to put me over there.
So what are you guys? 60, 62?
63.
63 or just 64, 64, 64?
66, 66, 65.
You guys are young.
That's 66. 66.
Liar.
Clean living, huh? Okay, we'll call it that. Mickey, we're on you, what'd you say? 72. So think about everybody that was on that wall. If you take a mental picture of us on that wall, within about 10 years or less, we are going to Florida, right? It's timeshare time. So as I was doing a little research on this, I'd heard of some of the generations. I didn't quite know. Truthfully, I only knew mine. I only knew the baby boom. I am the last year of the baby boom, 64. And what's interesting is I had young parents. Dad was 19, mom was 18 when they had me. So they're baby boomers also. Actually, my dad actually goes into this because he's born in 45. But that's interesting when you have young parents. I used to teach a lot of kids that had young parents. And then at the end of my career as an administrator in the school, I'd start to have some of their kids in the classroom. And it's incredible how kids are a lot like their parents. They look like them and they act like them. Take a look at the continuum. The traditionalists, the silent generation, 25 to 45. Normally a generation is considered 20 years, as I was doing the research. 46 to 64 is the baby boom. Generation X, 65 to 76. Then it got a little cloudy right here, and we're going to discuss that a little bit. Millennials is what we normally call this group. They also call them Generation Y, I think just the whole X, Y, and Z. But I was doing some research, and it said Generation Y is a fake. They just made that up. That's kind of like internet fake news. That is what they said. Normally, you call them millennials. And when they talked about millennials, they talked about the early 80s to the early 2000s. Was really about that, the sweet spot for millennials. We're going to get into that a little bit. And then this one, the last one, the people that are now starting to come into the workforce, it really kind of sounds like the zombie generation because, you know, everybody's doing the whole Walking Dead. But look at that, Generation Z, iGen, Centennials. That's kind of scary. So let's look at the silent generation. I try to do a lot of visual representations, 25 to 45. These are probably our parents, at least the baby boomers, our parents. We've come a long way as a country. The Red Scare. Look at Elkhart, Kansas down here. Hope you can see that dust cloud that was coming in. It kind of changed a lot of what was going on in the United States at that time. We see Rosie the Riveter, Frank Baum's Wizard of Oz, which was an allegory for a lot of different things, not just a funny kids musical. Black Tuesday, the Jim Crow sign in El Paso, Texas. I think a lot of us maybe remember that picture of family kind of displaced from the Dust Bowl and the Depression and the things that were going on in the country. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Do we remember how long Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in office? Anybody know? 12 years in office. They had to make a constitutional amendment so presidents couldn't serve that long in office anymore. All right? The one thing I wanted to focus in on is these two right here. Because of the dire times that our country went through, waste not, want not. Many people remember hearing that before. I had young parents, but I grew up around my grandparents also. So as I was doing a lot of this research, I was like, I heard this over and over and over again because between the older generation and my parents' generation, I used to just hear those things over and over. And children are to be seen and not heard. Who's heard that before? And you might get a swat if you didn't adhere to that, right? The baby boomers. Look at us. We are probably the progenitors of the American dream, right? American dream is we have a car, we have a house with a white picket fence, two and a half kids, a dog, possibly a cat also. You know, those are some of the things we used to hear about the baby boomers. But take a look at the consternation that was going on in the world. Vietnam, sit-ins. There's kind of an American dream picture right there. hand in hand, everybody trying to get equality. But look at some of the things that happened in the baby boom. There's an evolution here. Highest divorce rate and second marriage in U.S. history. I'm confident to say my parents got a divorce as a kid. When I was a kid, 8 years old, it changed my life. I tell my wife all the time, her parents were just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. I tell her she doesn't know how lucky she is because when you're a product of a divorce, you had a good, solid, stable home, and then that changed, it changes you a lot. And you kind of have to have some sanity and a little spiritualness has to help you because it changes you a lot as an 8-year-old and your parents are no longer together anymore. And I also, my first marriage ended in divorce. So you kind of become some of your parents sometimes. So you have to really worry about stepping away from some of the bad habits you saw and kind of forging yourself anew and not making some of the mistakes you may have seen. But look at what happened with the baby boomers. They were radicals in the 70s, and then they had to conform to society, and they became yuppies in the 80s. The American dream was pursued, and look at the characteristics at the bottom. These are probably the most effectual parts. They're ambitious, they're optimistic, materialistic, all right? Remember the generation before went through some dire times, so now that we have a little money, we like having money. Possibly greedy, politically correct, ethical, most educated of all generations. We can pat ourselves on the back. Look at Generation X. Watergate, political liars. Nobody lies in politics anymore, do they? Energy crisis. How many remember the Bicentennial Minute? I know all of us guys remember the Farrah Fawcett poster back in the day. Good times. Sammy Hagar made a song on this one, didn't he? I Can't Drive 55. Sorry, no gas. Who remembers the Bee Gees? Latchkey kids. This is where the latchkey generation started. Why? Because a lot of families had gone through divorce, so it was a single parent in the household, and kids had to be able to raise themselves during this generation, right? First generation to raise themselves, single parent homes. Usually the mom was raising kids, all right? We talked about greed, and we talked about wanting more and being materialistic in the older generation. What are we talking about now? Downsizing, conserving, and saving, because we don't have any as much. First generation that will not do as well financially as their parents, but they had a better work-life balance. Generation Y or millennials. You see, I kind of have two. As I was doing the research, it kind of had two different things going on there. But again, just think about millennials. Look at the pictures for millennials. Anybody remember this guy? Max Headroom, right? How about her? Where's the beef? Best movies back then, remember the Back to the Future movies? Those are kind of coming back a little bit. Everybody remembers this guy. He was America's dad now. Now he's America's deposed dad, isn't he? Remember those two? Nancy and Ronnie, all right? Rubik's Cube, cassette tapes. But look at the things that happened then. AIDS crisis. School shooters were born during this generation. Me first generation. They earned to spend, blended families, coddled kids who got trophies even for coming in last. But look at kind of the good things about this generation. They're global, they're ambitious, entrepreneurial, willing to share ideas, network. They want to know what's next. And look at what they say about millennials. 37% of them say they will purchase a product to support what they believe in. So they're not going to put their money in a product that's not meaningful, that's not good for the environment, that's not, think about Uber right now. Uber was blowing up and they're worth billions. And then we look behind the cover and we see, not dealing well with women in their culture. And it's kind of a bullying and a harassment type culture. So now they've had to take a step back. Sometimes you can grow a little bit too fast and be too ambitious. And then the last one we have right here. I generation or Generation Z, 96 to present. These are the people that are just now starting to come into our workplace. They're like some of our new hires. This is the generation that saw the terrorist attacks, the Great Recession. Look at some of the people we see and things that we see here. Everybody remember W? Look at what this generation has come up on. Technology and the internet. When you start hiring these people and you see them on their phones, and you think they're not doing their job, they could be on their phone doing everything you need them to do because they're using it as a computer. And they've been on that computer since they were knee-high to a grasshopper, right? So sometimes we got to understand that new generation might do things a little bit different than we do. Social media, selfies, iPod, iPhone, reality TV, this is all the norm for them. This is the fastest growing generation right now. They are self-aware, they're innovative, goal-oriented, highly educated, and they want to make a difference, and they embrace diversity. Many of the people that are coming into the workforce right here, I hate to use the word don't see color, because everybody should see color, but they embrace it. They embrace people that don't look like them, don't have the same culture as them, because they went to school with kids like that. Us, the older generation, we still kind of have the segregation that we went through, so we're not as comfortable as they are, all right? So we're going to have to start getting more comfortable with people that come into the workplace that are not the norm. They're not exactly like us. Take a look at the School Service Center. And if you look at our colors right here, 2012 is the kind of beige box, and 2017 is the whatever color that is. I'm not even going to try to use my color palette. Look what's happening. The baby boomers are doing what? Retiring. Look at Generation X. 2% increase. But look at our millennials. That's who we're hiring right now. And before long, this is the group that's really going to take off. We're going to be hiring them. We've got a lot of information on there. Again, we see 2012, we see 2017, and then we see where we started with baby boomers, where we are now. Some of the things that we see that stand out to us. Need to hire more women. Now think about it. This is a school service center. Women are going where the money, where the jobs are, because I think what we're seeing a lot of is having a college degree doesn't mean you're going to get a great job anymore. But being able to have certain technical skills that move forward that might not take a full 4-year, 6-year, 8-year college degree, but you can make a lot of money. Those wind farm engineers, they can't hire them fast enough. So I think we know that the world is changing a little bit, and the younger people are going to have to be able to get out of the box of women go to the secretarial role or the clerical role and men go to the technical roles. That may change. What else do we see? As you look at it, and the comment was made, we are still very white at the School Service Center. And I think that one of the things that I learned well before I ever got here, that this was a good old boys culture before, where I hired people that I knew, and I hired my cousins and everybody in that, and we worked our way up that way. And I think that's changed a little bit. We hire people that we know, but they still have to be qualified people. And we have people that come from a lot of different industries that have translated from what they used to do to what they're doing now in our school district. But think about our kids in school. What's the highest percentage of student population in our school district right now? Hispanic, 34%. All right? Then whites, 33%. Then I want to say African American might be 19% or so. So the kids we serve don't look a lot like the people who serve the kids, all right, especially in schools, all right? And that's probably going to change at some point. It's probably going to need to change, all right? Yes, sir.
Terry and I were discussing the question that was aired. It's interesting. The demographics here at School Service Center are similar to the demographics in the city, particularly in the city of Wichita. Central County, we weren't able to look at. What we found interesting about those demographics in the city as well as in School Service Center is the distribution of employees. So you have a good percentage of Hispanic employees. You have a good percentage of Hispanic employees that meets the number of the population in Wichita, but it's all in one area. It's not dispersed in all through School Service Center. It's in one area only. And I think we know where the vast majority of that population is. So it's interesting that the numbers are reflective of the city of Wichita when it comes to demographics, but when it comes to having 15% of Hispanics in equally distributed in all departments, that's not reflective of School Service Center. You guys should have a diversity awareness quiz. I want you guys to answer these questions and not think about it. Just go through it, boom, 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 answer the questions. And then what the whole objective is to see where your mindset is when it comes to a workforce that's diverse. And if you see something crazy going on, how motivated are you to address those things? And so this is not to incriminate you, but to be a self-assessment. So take a few minutes, just go through this, and we'll give you the key in a few seconds. This is what you're looking at when it comes to the awareness of these scores. If your scores are 0 to 12, it's saying you may be a little naive when it comes to cultural issues and flexibility of views. Meaning if you have a diverse workforce, and we'll get into religion, we'll get into LGBTQ, we'll get into disability and race. If you have a diverse workforce, you may be a little naive when it comes to someone coming to you saying those guys aren't treating me right, or they're picking on me because of my dress or because of my culture and various things. 13 to 12 may not feel comfortable defending others or avoid it, but will at a certain point. That's the population to where enough is enough. And you try to be flexible and understanding of your workforce, but enough is enough, and you will defend it at a certain point. 23 to 29 has no problem being a change agent, meaning this. Someone comes to you and says, this needs to be changed. It doesn't have to do anything with culture or race. It's just, hey, we could find a better way of doing things in this business and doing things. You're willing to listen to that and make those changes. And then 30 to 36, no problem being a fighter of others' rights. If you see something that is not right, you immediately jump on that and you correct those things because it's a reflection of you. Let me go over some information really quick to apply what we've discussed and what Mr. Mitchell has laid the foundation on. When you look at your baby boomers, most baby boomers were into work for longevity purposes. Let me ask this question to prove that point. How many of us have been here for 5 years? 10 years, 15 years. And so when you look at that, and I'm a 10-year, those are people who got that job and they're going to keep that job. And so you also look at people who believe that hard work was important, that was instilled in them with their parents and the generation before them. And also they respect authority. They may not agree with authority, but they're going to do it. I mean, they might kind of like grumble as they work with you, but they're going to follow through with things. Also, the ladies were starting to come out. At this point, ladies were starting to be more assertive and take more of a role and more of a challenge in the workplace and not settle for being typecast as someone that's supposed to just either be a nurse or someone that's supposed to be a teacher or someone that's supposed to do ladylike things. And stability was very important for that generation. Then you look at Generation X, you get into the computer phases coming into place. And it seemed pretty scary at that time. Stability was important, but there was more freedom on the job. So those employees you work with, they like stability. They want to work here, but they want to have a little more say than the previous generation. And they also had in mind that I want your job. So they pay attention to you and learn from you. And sometimes they do so without being insulting. So those are people who they were being groomed to take over positions. And also, women broke traditional roles. And they made sure that they were broken to where they were they were more assertive in getting into areas that were in the past just for men. And then you get into your Generation Ys and your Millennials, computer-driven individuals, very automated. They're on their phones. You're saying, get off your phone, I'm going to write you up. And they're on their phones trying to figure out a better way of doing something that they see you're struggling with to assist you. But we don't understand that. Or we had struggles with that. Longevity wasn't as important because they want to be marketable. They'll stay on this job for a little. They don't see why you are upset because I'm on this job for less than 5 years and move on. It's not that I'm a slacker. It's because I want to make the most of my opportunities. And so they're not there like your forefathers to where they grab that job and they're there for 30, 40 years. The interesting thing, they thought they know more than you. Your kids are like that as well. They think they know more than you do. They think that you're a dinosaur. So in the workforce, they may approach you in the fact that I know more than you do, and sometimes it's hard to manage them because of that aspect. And they have less hang-ups than the previous generations. They don't have a problem with a transgender employee in the workplace. They don't have a problem with diversity in religion and various things as our previous generations may have had. You had handouts about LGBTQ in the workplace. And School service center is different than our schools. We don't have a large percentage. Matter of fact, I don't know if we have any individuals who are transgender that are in the workplace. We've had before. But when you're looking at this population, there's an increasing number of individuals openly living with a gender identity difference than the one that was assigned to them at birth. They use the preferred name and the gender pronoun of the employee, meaning regardless of how we feel, we can't go around saying, I knew you when you were Pete and I'm going to call you Pete. We're getting sued for those things in the workplace. And so the thing is, our focus should be on managing that population, on managing that employee and the work that they do, not worried about how they dress in the morning or who they sleep with at night. In our public school system, 315 staff members identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. And 177 staff members and students identify as being transgender. Let me give you this information because I trained in this room over that, special training over that about a year or so ago with security and different others. That number is not going to decrease. That number is going to change, is going to increase because there's the belief, like any other movement, that it's our time. I'm tired of being in the closet. We have to be very careful in managing that workforce because people are getting sued for making snide comments or comments that they don't agree with. And those lawsuits are not small lawsuits at all. This is what we suggest when it comes to managing that population as well as a lot of other populations. If you're not the type that you can sit with that person because you don't agree with them and what they're into and whatever the case may be, find someone who is sensitive to talk to that person and find out what they want. You'd be surprised it's not that demanding. In this case, I would prefer you to call either Ben, myself, whoever, and have us to work out those things to where you're not comfortable with before we say something that's going to get you sued or us sued. Tailor accommodations on a case-by-case basis. In our schools, some kids want this type of restroom. Some kids could care less where they use the restroom. Some kids want dressed like this on certain occasions, some don't. It's a case-by-case basis. You're going to get a higher, and these kids are going to grow up and get into the workforce. They're already in the workforce. These individuals are going to be in the workforce and you're going to be managing them at one point in time. We have to get ready and adjust to that. Manage the reaction of others. That gets you in trouble as well, to where they're saying, you allow this person to mistreat me. And so in those cases, that even goes with our older generations. You can't have people saying, come on, Grandpa, we don't have any dinosaurs for you to, ride around on. We have trucks now. This is not the Flintstones. And then recognize that failure to provide those accommodations and manage those reactions could lead to litigation. We're in a very litigious time where people are suing over things that once in past generations you sucked it up and hey, you just took it. People aren't doing that anymore. They're getting attorneys. And then think about the public relations angles and manage that communication. It's about managing yourself and managing your workforce and being sensitive when it comes to those areas. On a religious basis, we're having religious discrimination. It speaks about the Muslim population as the whipping boy at this time. They're the ones that are getting mistreated in the workplace, and this is not just in USD 259, that's across the country. You still have people who are saying that they're not respected, even if they're Christian or not, or their accommodations are not accommodated. We don't have that problem when it comes to managing religious issues here because you don't have people saying, I need Sunday off, because in most cases, minus security, we're not here on Sunday. But we're finding out that a reasonable accommodation, particularly with a religious basis, if a person is sincere about that I need to, go to service, then if we worked on weekends, we would have to let them do that. We had controversy in our schools with students that were of Muslims that were needing a place to pray. They had to pray 4 times a day. And people were saying, why should we accommodate them and not accommodate others? And we try to accommodate people as best as possible and keep within the parameters of the law. It's illegal to harass individuals. What you deem as joking may be deemed as harassment by other individuals or by attorneys. The numbers are getting higher, and so are the lawsuits. On a disability basis, our focus when it comes to managing that population should be more on the fact that you're not going to have a person come in a wheelchair or come through the door where it's obvious that person has a disability. We're dealing more with disabilities that are innate, mental situations and various things of that nature that we're dealing with, that we will assist you with those things, but we have to be careful how we address those because the complaints have increased and so have the payouts. And so in this case, we ask you to be very careful about that, particularly when it comes to us addressing situations that deal with other generations, other disabilities, other races. We're not asking you to be robots, but those are things that we'll be glad to assist you with because our workforce is changing. And the way we managed things in the past, those things are getting people sued on. And I know that we're not fans of political correctness, not all around, but there are things of just being sensitive and respectful of individuals and focusing on their ability to do performance and adequate performance and not on the other things that really may be irrelevant to our employees in the workplace.